On top of the many pick profiles that there are out there, there's also a bunch of different locks with a bunch of different keyways. And sometimes navigating these keyways to pick the pins inside the lock can be very daunting, and you don't know which angle to place your pick, and you don't really know how to get at the pins. On top of that, you don't know which pick profile to choose because there's just so freaking many. So today we're going to go through a few of the most common locks, and we're going to talk about which picks I think work best and how to approach the different keyways in order to be able to reach the pins and successfully pick your lock. All right? I hope that this video is helpful. Let's get to it. First things first, when I'm getting ready to sit down to pick anything, I usually have these 4 things right here with me at all times. I've got a standard flat hook, and this is one of my favorite hooks because it's gotten me into tons and tons of different locks. It really is a great profile, especially when you don't know your approach to a lock and you're just trying to figure it out. Next up, I've got a long hook. The long hook allows you to get in behind some of those low set pins and set some of the pins that might be more higher set. It allows you to set those without oversetting the ones in front, and sometimes you just need that little bit of extra reach in order to set a pin. Next up, I've got top of keyway tensioners and a bottom of keyway tensioner. The flat bar is good for top of keyway, but the Z bar has a top of keyway and bottom of keyway end, so you can use it either way. And I like to have both options available because you just never know which way you're going to have to tension a lock. The master lock is the first lock that I want to take a look at. Check out that keyway. If you take a really close look, you can see that first pin sticking out, and it kind of helps when you see that first pin because you can kind of envision the angle you're going to have to pick in order to pick this. Most of you guys start out using bottom of keyway tension, and that leaves plenty of space to fit your pick. Now, going in here with a standard flat hook, you can see the angle that you're going to have to pick. You can rest your pick on your tensioner and kind of just go straight in with a little bit of an angle there to the left. Now, a lot of times when you first approach your lock and want to go straight into the lock, you're going to hit into some of the pins that are kind of binding. So you might have to let off your tension, put your pick all the way into the back of the lock first, then tension and start picking from the back to the front. And again, the angle's going to be kind of angled toward the left there. When using bottom of keyway tension, you want to make sure that your tensioner is fat enough and it doesn't interfere and kind of bind the core in any way. You can actually get it jammed in there at the bottom and make it so you can't turn your core any further, and you won't be able to get any binding pins, and you definitely won't be able to get your lock open. So make sure that your tensioner doesn't bind the core, and also if your lock has rivets, you want to make sure that your tensioner clears these rivets. There's nothing worse than picking and getting caught up on a rivet and not even realizing it. You can also approach this lock using top of keyway tension, and that does leave you tons of space inside of the keyway there in order to kind of reach those pins. Next up is the master lock number 141, and you can see that keyway is pretty wide open as well. You've got a little bit of warding down towards the bottom, but take a look at the key to this one. Now, I've noticed that a lot of these master lock number 141s have some very low set pins in the front, meaning you will probably have to use a longer hook in order to kind of hit these back pins without oversetting the front. So if you're going at this lock using bottom of keyway tension, you can see there is plenty of room in the keyway to get your pick, and you're going to have to angle up and to the left a little bit once again. And once again, we run into that issue where we might bump into some pins if you put tension on first. So you might have to let off the tension, put your pick into the lock, and then put some tension on and pick pulling outward. However, this time I did say you're probably going to need a longer hook in order to not overset those first couple of pins. And it's really hard to get a long hook in here with bottom of keyway tension. So you can either attempt to pick this lock using bottom of keyway tension and a standard hook, which even though the bitting shows you that you're probably going to need a longer hook, sometimes you can get away with using a short hook on these if you're careful. Most of the time, though, you might have to switch to top of keyway tension and use a longer hook. Switching to top of keyway tension with a long hook, you can see you can pretty much get your pick straight on into the keyway, and you'll be able to pick these pins in the back without even touching that front pin. All right. Next up, we've got this Brinks kind of Walmart special. I'm not really sure what you would even call this lock, but they come in green and they come in purple, and you can get them at Walmart. This is the keyway on the brinks, and as you can see, you can peek in and see that first pin. With the bottom of keyway tensioner in here, making sure that the tensioner doesn't bind the core. We can put our pick right into the front of the lock, however, we might bump into some pins. So again, we're going to let off tension, get the pick all the way in the lock, then put some tension on and pick pulling outward. And just kind of pressing upwards and hitting all the pins on the way out. All right. And there, this one's already open. Pretty easy. You can also approach this one using the top of keyway tension, and you can go in and avoid that warding altogether by just picking straight kind of upwards and angled off to the left a bit. Okay. Next up, we've got the Abus Titanium. This one is the 80 Ti-50. As you guys know, I hate the 64 Ti anything, and I won't pick them. So by now, you should be picking mostly using top of keyway tension, and so that's what we're going to attempt on this lock. Using top of keyway tension on here, you can still see the pins in there if you kind of angle it right, but with this one, you're just going to go in and pick kind of straight up and down. If you do decide to use bottom of keyway, once again, just make sure that your bottom of keyway tensioner isn't going to bind the core. This one looks like it works fine. And then you're just going to rest your pick on top of your tensioner and go through and pick this. You might have to place your pick in first and then apply tension and then kind of pick coming outwards. All right. And just kind of go through it that way. Next up, we've got the Abus 7240. Now, this one has a kind of angled keyway, and it's a little bit weird. Let's be honest. This thing's a little bit weird. Now, personally, I picked this one using top of keyway tension, and again, I'm just going to start off with my flat standard hook. Now, if you want to tension this one in the bottom, as you can see, there's not a lot of room between the end of that first pin and the top of your bottom of keyway tensioner. So you might actually be oversetting pins if you try to pick it with bottom of keyway tension. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done because I'm sure it can be. I just don't usually pick it that way. But again, if you do pick it that way, get your pick in there first, all the way in into the back, then put on the tension, and then pick kind of coming outwards. You can see you're going to be picking at a little bit of an angle to be able to get at those pins, and you're going to be resting on your tensioner the whole way through the lock. I much prefer top of keyway tension on this one. I found the way to pick this one is go in through the bottom and kind of go straight up at the pins. Get them all set, as many as you can, coming straight at the bottom. And then sometimes you've got to follow the pins upward. So you kind of have to end up resting your tensioner on this piece of warding and finish picking the pins. Sometimes you can just get it from the bottom going straight up and you never have to chase the pins. Next, we've got the Master Lotto 410. Now, I have noticed that I think there are two different keyways on this Master Lotto 410. One that kind of angles in this direction and one that kind of angles in this direction. But for now, we're just going to take a look at this one. We're going to be still using the standard flat hook, and you can just kind of tension in the bottom of keyway. And to get at the pins, you kind of have to angle your pick up in a little bit to the left there. And the whole time going through the lock, you're going to be resting on this tensioner while you're picking. I much prefer using top of keyway tension on these. That's what that would look like. And then you've got tons of room in the bottom of the keyway to get your pick in there and navigate around to get the pin set. Now, again, you'll go in and you can go into the bottom, but you're still going to have to angle up and, to the left to get at those pins. As you can see, I'm already in a false set. So, I would just continue on through, picking this one very gently, and yeah, that's about it for this one. That's all you pretty much have to do with these. They're not too bad. They do have a wide open keyway. It's just the angle is just a little bit weird sometimes. It feels weird picking these. But once you get used to it and get the hang of it, you're good to go. Last but definitely not least is the American 1100. You can see this keyway has lots of warding in the way, and you can pick it again using bottom or top. Okay, so bottom of keyway, here you go. Kind of get your tensioner in there, making sure that it's not going to bind the core like this one. This one here would bind the core. So it's kind of slipping under that warding. So I'm going to have to get something a little bit fatter than this to fit in the bottom of the keyway. So yeah, that's not going to work either. You definitely need something that's not going to slip underneath this piece of warding and bind your core. But once you get your tensioner in place, it's going to block this whole piece of warding here off. So you're going to have to lay your pick on here and or on your tensioner once it's in, and kind of pick angling over to the right this time. All right. Now, I can't find a tensioner that's not going to bind the core, so I'm just going to go ahead and use Topic keyway tension on this lock. Using Topic keyway tension, you can see I got tons of room in the keyway in order to approach this lock. And again, I'm just going to go up and to the right to pick the pins. Just got to angle your pick in the right direction to get them. All right. But you've got plenty of room because you don't have anything blocking the bottom of the keyway. So to sum things up, for the master number 3, you want to make sure to avoid the rivet. You don't want to get snagged up on a rivet when you're trying to tension or pick these. Also, you want to make sure not to kind of get your tensioner stuck under that piece of warding and bind the core. So be careful of that on the master number 3. The master number 410, there's some low cuts in the front, so you might have to tension in the top of the keyway and use a longer hook to get at those back pins without oversetting the front pins. For the brinks, we learned that sometimes you cannot fit your pick into the lock after it's been tensioned because those pins that are binding, they don't want to move out of the way. So you might have to put your pick all the way into the back of the lock first, then apply your tension and pick the lock from the last pin to the first pin instead of the first pin to the last pin, at least on your first pass through the lock. Abus titanium, sometimes when you tension this one, the pins feel like they're in a different position for some reason. It is definitely just something that's in your head. The pins are still in the same place they were before you tensioned it. It just feels a little different. So you might have to kind of get your pick in and on the pins first and then put some tension on. That way you don't kind of lose the place as to where the pins are. For the 7240, even though it looks like this keyway is angled and you can't pick straight from the bottom, you absolutely can pick straight up from the bottom, at least starting out. So you want to start out picking up straight from the bottom, get all of those pins set, and then make a second round. And if you have to, you can follow the pins up and rest on that second piece of warding in order to finish picking this one. The Master Lotto 410. This does have a dead core, guys, and so you might not feel some of the counter rotation that you are expecting to feel. It's just going to be a little bit dead. Okay, so you're going to have to pay extra close attention to the feedback you get when picking this lock. I do prefer Topic keyway on this one for sure, because I like having lots of room in the bottom of the keyway in order to get my pick around inside this lock. For the 1100, you definitely want to make sure you're not binding the core with the bottom of keyway tensioner. It's going to be rough. You're going to have to find one that's fat enough to not slip in under that piece of warding down at the bottom. Also, guys, don't forget that this takes a lot of pressure to turn the core on this one, just as much as it takes when you use the key. So you're going to have to make sure that once you get a false set, double check and make sure that your lock's not open, because sometimes it's actually open and you never even knew it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you would like more information on the different types of pick profiles that there are, check out this video right here, and I will see you on the next one. Subscribe.